With all the rumors swirling around about Aaron Rodgers, I'm getting a little bit excited, so I wanted to build a mock offseason revolving around the star quarterback. Here's what I would do if I was the Jets GM. Jets! Welcome to Jets Talk. My name's Ryan. I'll be your pilot. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button. If you've been here before, welcome back. I love having you here. Boys and girls, I'm really excited for this. We are building a mock offseason surrounding Aaron Rodgers and the thought of him possibly coming to New York in a blockbuster trade. I want to talk about all my thoughts in what that would cost, his contract, the free agents, the cuts, everything, the drafts, everything you could do to build a Super Bowl caliber roster for the Jets for the next two seasons around Aaron Rodgers. So let's jump into it. First and foremost, we've heard from our owner. He is absolutely willing to spend and upgrade the quarterback position. So that's obviously where all this sort of comes in. And the hirings of Nathaniel Hackett and the connection with him and Aaron Rodgers is where all this starts to kind of get interesting. Keith Carter was brought in as our offensive line and running back coach. So we'll have little bits of knowledge in there based on his experiences and players that might be attracted because of his addition to the New York Jets. And then obviously Aaron Rodgers is going to be the main focal point here. Before we go into anything, we do have to talk about our cap space. Spot Track and Over the Cap are both in sync right now. And the Jets, according to both sites, have negative $2.6 million in salary cap space heading into the 2023 offseason. I've included the 2024 cap as well, so that way you know how much cap space we have over these next 2 years that we hope to be Super Bowl runs with Aaron Rodgers. Now, first and foremost, we do have to talk about Aaron Rodgers and what it's going to cost in terms of his contract. If he's traded, he has an option not even if he's traded. He's got an option in his contract that basically converts one of his bonuses into a signing bonus, so it pushes cap from the current year into a later year, in a sense. So his cap hits, if traded to the New York Jets, would be $15 million in 2023 and $32.5 million in 2024. Now, assuming he retires after those 2 years and you want to see what you have in Zach Wilson, maybe on his fifth-year option, you're going to get hit with a massive $60 million dead cap hit. Now, that could be alleviated a little bit to like $30 million and $30 million over the course of 2 years if you convince Rodgers to retire after June 1st, so that way you don't have the brunt of that cap hit all accelerating to that 1 year. Entirely possible, or you could work out another contract that maybe makes it a little bit easier to take on that hit. But I don't think that's overly a concern because you have 3 years to worry about it. You can plan your other contracts around that dead cap hit and just push money off into a year further or a year earlier if you really needed to. So I'm not too concerned about it. So overall, where we're starting as of this contract, we are negative $17.6 million in the salary cap department. So we're going to have to cut some players, restructure some things, make some stuff work out, and then see if we can add some free agents and what we can do about that. Now, as far as Aaron Rodgers, not even just the contract, but what are we going to have to give up in terms of a trade? Because that, to me, is an interesting thought process. So you have all 32 teams, obviously except for the Packers, but they have said they are not going to trade him to an NFC team, so we can eliminate those teams. If you take out the teams with franchise quarterbacks, that list gets a little bit smaller. Now, I tend to think that the Texans sitting at the number 2 pick are probably going to draft their new quarterback with that number 2 overall pick, and I think the Steelers, taking Kenny Pickett last year, they're probably going to wind up rolling with him. At this point, I think he showed enough promise to not necessarily have to go out and get an Aaron Rodgers. The Raiders, I think, are probably going to go after Tom Brady. That feels like, to me, the move that they're, jockeying to make. I guess you could, in a sense, think that Rodgers may want to go play with Devontae Adams again, and I understand that. Maybe he wants to win a Super Bowl in the city of Vegas because that's where the 2023 or 4 Super Bowl is. 2024 Super Bowl, I guess next year's Super Bowl. So maybe like Tom Brady, he wants to win one in the city that it's for. That's entirely possible. But I think they're going to go with Tom Brady in that direction. And then sort of the same thing with like the Patriots. I don't see Aaron Rodgers wanting to go to like the Patriots in particular, just because of the whole Tom Brady mystique. I don't think he wants to kind of live in that shadow. Like there's nothing you can do as Aaron Rodgers in New England that's ever going to see you in a better light than Tom Brady, I don't think. So we're going to eliminate the Patriots here. Now you get down to these final 3 teams. And I think when you look at the Titans roster and the way maybe their offensive line performed this year with some of the injuries and Derrick Henry kind of getting up there in age, maybe the trade of A.J. Brown may have rubbed you a little bit the wrong way. Not to mention they're in some pretty serious cap trouble. I think the Titans, based on their roster, are probably not going to be a major option for Aaron Rodgers, even though there's the connection with Matt LaFleur and his former team, the Titans there. So possible, I guess, but I would say maybe a little less likely. That takes us down to these final two teams. And these are sort of the two teams that have been in the running for the major quarterbacks, the free agent guys, the traded guys, and a draft pick quarterback, because the Colts own the 4th pick overall. So they could wind up, using that 4th pick on a quarterback. I think it's entirely likely that they do, or they could go after someone like Derek Carr. So for me, I think based on the personalities of everyone involved, I do think Carr ends up in Indianapolis, and I think Rodgers ends up in New York. And I think it's going to be one big happy to do. Now, because of those trade packages and because there's very few teams willing to do it, I think this is what you can get Aaron Rodgers for. I think you could give up a 2023 second-round pick, and then you can make it a conditional 2024 pick based on performance this year. That's kind of like what the Brett Favre deal was. It might have been a 4th to start, and then if he played like all the games, it was a 3rd-round pick. I think playoffs was 2nd and Super Bowl was 1st round. And that would basically be how you would structure the conditional portion of this trade with Rodgers. They'd get the 2nd-round pick this year and then a 3rd-round pick next year at the minimum. So they're getting a 2nd and 3rd for Aaron Rodgers, and they don't have to pay him that $58 million that they're going to have to pay him for this upcoming year, so they can see what they have in Jordan Love. If he takes us to the playoffs next year, that increases to a 2nd-round pick, and if you make the playoffs, you don't have to win the playoffs. If you make the playoffs, you get the 1st-round pick. So if you're telling me I could get to the Super Bowl and the most I'd be paying is a 2nd and a 1st-round pick, yeah, I'm about that. So I think you can definitely get this done for Rodgers. This takes us down to our salary cuts. Got to make some space, obviously, with not a lot of money to work with here. We're going to have to make some cuts. Now, this one's been coming for a while. Braden Mann, $2.7 million. We're going to save that. I'm going to go with some undrafted free agent punter or, bare bones punter at this point. I had hope for Braden Mann. The kid's got a strong leg, but too often than not, he's outkicking his coverage, and it has led to 2 punt return touchdowns this year that wound up costing the Jets severely in games. And he's the one that tackled the Rams kick returner when we beat them when we could have had Trevor Lawrence. He's the reason we don't have Trevor Lawrence. So yes, I'm salty. $2.7 million down the drain, Braden Mann, sorry. Jordan Whitehead. We're going to move on from you after one season, $7.25 million saved. I really like Jordan Whitehead. I was contemplating trying to figure out how to maybe extend him and lower his cap hit a little bit, and I just couldn't find a way to do that, so we're going to move on from him. Too many missed tackles for me. I would move on from him there. Corey Davis, while I really like him, $10.5 million is a lot to have saved. I would say if you could restructure Corey Davis and he'll take less money to be your 3rd wide receiver, that's the route I would probably prefer to take. I wanted to make it a little, little interesting. I've been saying I think we're going to cut Corey Davis for a little while, but I think you could restructure him and then maybe not be pressed for that additional wide receiver. But we're going to cut him in this scenario. Braxton Berrios, love you, brother, but $5 million saved against the salary cap. We need you to be a little bit more than just a kick returner for $5 million. And I think you can have some other talent do that without, The reason I want to bring back Braxton Berrios and Corey Davis, both guys, well, Corey Davis was under contract, but specifically Braxton Berrios, was because of their connection with Zach. And at this point, if you're going with Aaron Rodgers, I think you kind of allow yourself the opportunity to move on from Davis, move on from Berrios, because by the time Zach potentially gets another opportunity, neither of these guys are really going to be here anyway. And then rounding out our cuts, we're going to cut Carl Lawson. This has allowed us, the Carl Lawson signing, while disappointing, has, I don't know. I'm disappointed about the Carl Lawson signing because I was very excited when we did sign him. I think he's a really good person, and I really enjoyed the personality of Carl Lawson that we've been able to see from the behind the scenes on the One Jets Drive stuff and everything along those lines. But the drafting of Jermaine Johnson, Michael Clemens, and the finding of Bryce Huff has allowed us the opportunity to move on from Carl Lawson, save this big-time cap hit, and open up some reps for a Jermaine Johnson, for a Michael Clemens, for a Bryce Huff, and a John Franklin Myers. Have those 4 guys rotating. I think we're going to be just fine on the defensive line. So right now the Jets are sitting $23.3 million in salary cap space for this year and $79.8 million for 2024. Now, moving on from there, we're going to want to restructure some of these contracts. There's a lot of stuff going on, and particularly CJ Mosley. CJ Mosley is one that I've said for a while I would like to restructure, because I think I would go to CJ Mosley. I think you could go to CJ Mosley and say, look, you've got a $21.5 million salary cap hit this year. We can't have that. Like, we're trying to win a Super Bowl. We're going all in on Aaron Rodgers. We want to restructure you. We want to make you retire a Jet. We want to go for rings right now, and we want to use the salary cap savings that we're going to use on your contract to bring back the two other linebackers that you had next to you this past year. And I think that's a receptive conversation you could have with CJ Mosley. You could say, hey, look, your next 2 years are guaranteed. We can move on from you after the 2024 season. You can retire, or you can, do whatever you want to do. But the Jets save $11.8 million by doing that move, and it doesn't open up a hole at linebacker. CJ Mosley played much better than I would have thought he was going to play, given what we kind of saw from the limited amount of time in the years prior. The other player I want to look to restructure is John Franklin Myers. And I really like JFM. I think he's gotten a little bit of flack because of the tail off in production since he got paid, but I think now that you see a healthy rotation of players on the defensive line, he's not forced to do everything himself, and I think you're starting to see him blossom a little bit. I think he had a really nice season. His original hit was a $12.4 million hit. His new hit's going to be $5.5 million. You would be able to move on from him after the 2024 season. So both these players drop their cap hits to facilitate a Super Bowl run, and they are on the team for the next 2 years. So as of this, Jets are now up to $42.4 million this year and $72.3 million for 2024. And we have our quarterback under contract. That's nice, right? Looking good. The first guy we're going to take care of is Bryce Huff. Bryce Huff is a restricted free agent, meaning he has not played 3 full seasons in the NFL, which means the Jets have the opportunity to tag him with one of 3 tenders. There's the original round tender, the second round tender, and the first round tender. Now, because of how insanely productive Bryce Huff is and the relatively small difference in price from second round tender to first round tender, I believe it's a $4 million versus $6 million tag, I'm going to use the first round tender on Bryce Huff because I think it would really suck to wind up losing him for a second round pick. I don't know if you're going to find a better pass rusher that is producing right now like the way Huff is. And I think it would be, a fool's errand to let him just go for that price. So we bring back Bryce Huff, hopefully with a little bit more playing time. He continues to take that next step. And then maybe after the season, you consider signing him to a longer term deal here. But I really like me some Bryce Huff. The next big thing on the docket is taking care of Quinnen Williams. Now, he is our big time question mark as far as guys on our active roster and how we're going to take care of him. This is the first player since Muhammad Wilkerson that we want to give a second contract to. I mean, you think about it, Muhammad Wilkerson was drafted in like 2010. So it's been, 9 years since we've wanted to give out a second contract. Now, Quinnen is going into the 5th year option of his 5-year rookie contract that is due $9.5 million against our salary cap. Now, if you were to tag him each of the next 2 years with the franchise tag, it would roughly cost you $18.9 million and $22.7 million for a total of $51.1 million over these next 3 years. And I think that's an important thing to consider because that should be the baseline, thought if you're Quinnen Williams for what a cap could potentially be on the money that you could make in a 3-year span. Because Joe Douglas doesn't have to give you more money than that unless he wants to be a good guy. Now, the average for a top defensive tackle in the league is about $22 million a year. That's probably what you're going to have to pay Quinnen Williams because Aaron Donald's getting 32 or 31 million. You're not going to pay him that much. Everyone else is getting like 20, 21 million. I think you go to Quinnen, you say, hey, we want to make you the second highest paid defensive tackle behind only Aaron Donald. And Aaron Donald is kind of one of one. I think most players can understand that when there's such a drastic leap there. And you say, hey, we want to make you a Jet for the next 4 years. We're going to put this contract on you. You're not going to have to worry about a franchise tag after this contract is up. You're going to be able to hit the open market unrestricted at that point. You're only going to be 28 years old. So for me, I really like the idea of retaining Quinnen Williams. And if you give him this type of contract, a 4-year, $88 million deal, these are what the cap hits would look like. And it's really not that bad. You increase his cap hit this year by like $2.5 million. And it allows you to spread out some of this money a little bit easier. But it's really not as, shocking as maybe you may have been concerned about with taking on a big quarterback contract here. As far as free agency goes, I guess before we get to free agency or right as we get to it, we're going to want to bring home some of our own players. And I have said this offseason is more about the players that you retain than the players that you bring in. I don't think you're going to have to go overly crazy over the top in free agency, but bringing back your main core of guys is really going to be just what the doctor ordered. One guy that I want to bring back, Joe Douglas mentioned consistency along the offensive line. And while Connor McGovern does not have the nasty streak that I really want him to have, I think he is, if nothing else, consistent for the New York Jets. Now, SpotTrack has his market value as $12.5 million a year. That would be a 2-year, $25 million contract, which is what I had initially in my first mock offseason. I think the players with bringing in Aaron Rodgers are going to take a little bit less. I think Connor McGovern, being at that 30-year-old age mark, is going to want to ring hunt right now. 2 years, $16 million, I think, is more than fair for the center. I would bring back Quincy Williams. Like I said, 2 years, $6 million. That's $3 million a year. That's a $1 million savings from where I had them in my previous mock offseason. Again, a little bit of savings there. Quan Alexander, same reason, retain the linebacker core. At the very least, you have a baseline of last year's linebacker core, and then you can try to build on that through, undrafted free agency, the draft, camp pickups, things of that nature. And then we're going to bring back Greg Zuerlein as well. Got to have a kicker. He's been relatively strong for us, considering all the headaches we've had at the kicking position over the last few years. Let's take the guy that made the 60-yarder in less than ideal conditions. Continuing up, we're going to bring back Sheldon Rankins. We need a run-stuffing defensive tackle, and Sheldon Rankins has been a nice little find here from the New Orleans Saints. We're going to give him a 1-year, $5 million contract to come back for the New York Jets. So the Jets have retained a nice chunk of their own talent. We'll start to look outside at free agents that we could potentially look at. Now, David Bakhtiari, the left tackle from the Green Bay Packers, is set to have a $28 million salary cap hit against the Packers salary cap this year. He has been named as one of the players that Aaron Rodgers wants to play with. He has been incredibly good while healthy, although health might be a little bit of a concern. Over the course of the last few years, he's missed a little bit of time. So, there is some level of concern with that. But I think 4 years, $48 million, $12 million a year with 2 years fully guaranteed with Aaron Rodgers is kind of exactly what the doctor ordered. I think Rodgers gets his guy behind him. Bakhtiari has made a bunch of money already. I think he can take this level of play take this level of contract given the inconsistency in the health department. So I like this one a lot. You have your starter at left tackle, at least while Rodgers is here. The next one I want to bring in, we're going to have to replace Braxton Berrios, a backup slot. Randall Cobb, one of Aaron Rodgers' best buddies. You bring him in on a 1-year, $2 million contract. Not going to cost you a whole heck of a lot of money. The next one up would be Adrian Amos, strong safety from the Green Bay Packers. We have cut Jordan Whitehead. This move brings in a guy that is a captain on his team, and he was drafted by Joe Douglas. Oddly enough, Adrian Amos was drafted by the Chicago Bears while Joe Douglas was the director of player personnel, college personnel, scouting, whatever he was in Chicago. Joe Douglas was there when they made this, I think it was a 5th-round selection with Adrian Amos, if I'm not mistaken. But he's a little bit older, 29 years old, still has gas left in the tank. Think of this kind of like maybe your LaMarcus Joyner kind of signing, 1 year, $2 million. This guy is a communicator in the back end for a very strong Green Bay secondary. The final player I want to bring in free agency is a 1-year, $1 million Corey Levin, the backup offensive lineman for the Tennessee Titans. Now, with Keith Carter coming in from the Titans as the offensive line coach, I do think we're going to bring in some of their offensive line talent, or at least have it in our back pocket. Now, across these free agents, you have your backup offensive lineman that might replace someone maybe like a Herbig or a Feeney in Levin. You're not expecting a whole lot from him, but I think there's some more options down the road. Taylor Lewan, the left tackle for the Tennessee Titans, had a major injury last year. Probably not going to, I think it was an ACL. I'm pretty sure it was an ACL. May contemplate retirement, most likely won't be ready until like August of this upcoming year. So if the Jets do wind up having an injury, he's probably going to be cut by the Titans because of his massive cap hit. I think he could be an option for the New York Jets in the training camp portion if you want to bring in an additional tackle help, almost like a Dwayne Brown or a Morgan Moses was in these past few years for us. So going from there, we're going to look at the NFL draft now. And now with this, the Jets have a first-round pick, third-round pick, fourth-round pick, fifth-round pick, sixth-round pick. The second-round pick that we had for this year, we traded for Aaron Rodgers at the beginning of this video, and then the fifth round pick, or I guess the other sixth round pick that we used to have, we traded for James Robinson. It could have been a fifth round pick if he hit certain accolades. That was not the case. So we do have 1, 3, 4, 5, 6 as far as our draft picks are concerned. Now, first up, I'm looking at tackle. I'm still concerned. I don't love that right now Mekhi Becton is penciled in as our right tackle, and I don't love that it's just Bakhtiari and Brown on the left-hand side. You're dealing with a little bit of age and maybe not a ton of potential safety nets. Now, the issue here is that there are 3 top tackles in this draft class before the 13th pick could be taken. If you think Tom Brady goes to the Raiders, I think they could take a tackle there. I think it's entirely possible that the Titans are taking a tackle just in front of the New York Jets at, I think they are 11 because they are losing Taylor Lewan, like I mentioned. I think it's entirely possible the Texans either take a tackle at 12 right in front of the Jets or trade out with the Bears, and the Bears might take a tackle in front of us. So in this mock, because I cut Corey Davis, because I think the tackles may go in front of us, I have the Jets going a different route in the first round than I would particularly like, but I think it's still going to be a potential need, and this is the wide receiver out of TCU, Quentin Johnson. He is 6'4", 215 pounds. He had 60 receptions this past year, over 1,000 yards and 6 touchdowns. His metrics are expected to be very, very good. 4.4 speed, 42-inch vertical at 6'4" is outrageous. An 11-foot broad jump. This guy is going to be explosive. When you put on the tape, this guy provides something to our offense that our current receivers just do not provide to us. So I would like to bring him in here, give Rodgers a weapon in the first round. Since he's been a Packer, they have not drafted any weapons in the first round at all. I think he can come to the New York Jets. We're going to provide him a little bit of stability, and it'll be on Joe Douglas to select offensive linemen maybe to give us some depth across the board here. But I really like this. He's got outstanding body control. Again, the alternative picks for me, if they're available, would be the offensive lineman, and then maybe you look a different direction at the wide receiver position. Now, I did want to bring in Allen Lazard in free agency. The reason I did not do that is because he has not gotten paid in a big-time capacity, and I think if there's a chance in a relatively weak wide receiver market this year, I think there's more of a likelihood that someone else pays Allen Lazard more than I feel comfortable with the Jets paying him based on where our current construction of roster is right now. So as much as I like Lazard, I'm going to say we probably don't get him in free agency based on the price point. Skipping the second round, going on to the third round, the Jets select Ricky Stromberg, the center from Arkansas. He is 6'4", 318 pounds. He is a center/guard, but he has been a 4-year starter for Arkansas at center. He has given up 4 sacks in his career, just 3 quarterback hits. He is advertised as a high IQ player and calls the protections out on the line of scrimmage. Now, the other guys you can look at as well in this round, guys like Kyle Weipler and Cedric Van Pran. I think center is going to be a really, really important need for this team, and a guy that could possibly play guard is sort of how I want to address the offensive line in 2 facets, because I don't trust Laken Tomlinson to play back to a Pro Bowl level after watching him play this past year. So I want someone in the wings that could hop in the event that he bottoms out, but I don't want to pay a guard a crazy ton of money to replace that level of production. So I think you go a little bit higher and you get someone that you can plug in at guard next to McGovern for at least a year, and then you can allow him maybe to take over in 2024 if you feel comfortable cutting McGovern after that point. I really like this. I think center has been a big-time need for the New York Jets for a while, and we really need a mean streak, and it just hasn't really been there. I mean, think about how lucky we got. Mawai, Mangold, all in a row. We got to get our next one. Stromberg's going to be that guy. In the fourth round, we're looking linebacker. We're going to need to replace Quan Alexander at some point. DeMarvion Overshone is the guy I'm selecting out of Texas. 6'4", 224 pounds. He is a 3-year starter. He transitioned from safety, and he is a 3-level defender, meaning he can cover the pass. He can hit the piss out of you in the run game. And yeah, I mean, he can pass rush, attack the run game, cover. That's really what we're looking at here. I think this is a really nice option for the New York Jets. You can look at maybe a center in the fourth round if you wanted to do that. Some other guys, defensive linemen, things of that nature in the fourth round. But I like the linebacker. I think it provides good value at this point in the draft. In the fifth round, I have the New York Jets selecting Akeem Mesidor, the defensive tackle out of Miami. He's 6'3", 280 pounds. He had 2 years at WVU. He transferred to Miami for his 1 season this past year. In 11 games, he had 26 stops, 28 pressures, and 8 sacks. This guy is a pass rusher that could help spell Quinnen Williams. In the event that Quinnen either goes down or, has to take his foot off the gas for any amount of time, it's nice to have some level of pass rush in there behind him. And I think this is someone that might be able to groom and learn behind an all-pro in Quinnen Williams. I like this. I think you're going to need defensive tackle at some point. Maybe you want to go a little bit more on the side of run-stuffing defensive tackle than pass-rushing defensive tackle, just because you're going to lock up Quinnen Williams. And Rankins is only on a 1-year deal. I can understand that. But for me, I like the idea of getting to the quarterback, and I can deal with the running back stuff maybe in an undrafted free agent or something along those lines. And then in the sixth round, I'm going to round this out. We're going to go Ryan Hayes, the left tackle from Michigan in the sixth round. Joe Douglas found his left tackle in Philadelphia in the sixth or seventh round, whatever it was. He's now on a long-term contract, one of the best tackles in the game, on the best offensive line in the country currently for the Eagles. So I think Joe Douglas goes back to the well in the later rounds to try and fix this offensive line, or continue to fix this offensive line through a pipeline of younger guys that can groom and learn. This guy is a monster at 6'7", 307 pounds, so maybe a touch lighter than you'd like to see at that particular size. I mean, heck, look at it. 307, that's what, 60 pounds lighter than Mekhi Becton at the same height? Guy's a little more nimble maybe. He has over 2,100 snaps at tackle. I think from an experience perspective, you're probably getting a little bit more polished of a player because of the amount of reps that he's taken. He has positional versatility, meaning his arms are a little bit shorter. So while he can play tackle right now, there are a lot of people that think he may transition a little bit more to guard at the next level. He is a violent run blocker, and he's only given up 4 career sacks. So that's something that I think is really impressive to look at. And then at the back end of the draft, as far as alternatives, you're looking maybe for some special teams guys that can bring a little bit of pop to the unit on the back end. But overall, Jets draft, hopefully we can hit it out of the park the same way we hit it out of the park this past year. So to go into a recap, I want to look at everything we just did from start to finish and kind of look at the roster. You guys can see all the names in red were draft picks. All the ones with the little red star, those are going to be new acquisitions to the New York Jets. So recapping everything, you have a Super Bowl quarterback that can mentor Zach for the next 2 years. So hopefully you don't throw out that number 2 overall pick that you spent just 2 years ago. We have addressed left tackle, center, and guard in this draft. Taylor Lewan, I mentioned the left tackle from the Titans, may be an August add in the event that we have some type of injury on our offensive line. His relationship with Keith Carter, I think, is going to play a pivotal role in the Jets possibly acquiring him. Not to mention the Jets being perceived as a Super Bowl team with Rodgers, I think could lend itself to maybe having Lewan come over here. Over the course of these next 2 years, the Jets are going to have $12.9 million and $27.3 million in salary cap space in 2023 and 2024. That allows you some space to make some in-season moves. The Jets are projected to spend about $4 million on their draft class this year, so you're going to have about $8 million for in-season moves. Maybe someone gets hurt. Maybe you got to make a trade at the trade deadline. If you're going for a ring, you got to have a little bit of money on the salary cap that you can facilitate some additions mid-season here. Quinnen Williams has been re-signed on his long-term deal. He's the first Jet to be re-signed in the first round since Muhammad Wilkerson. You give Rodgers a first-round weapon. This is the first time he's had a first-round weapon in a long time. I think that's going to go a long way towards, building a nice little bridge here. He's able to throw to a bunch of young studs that don't cost us a whole heck of a lot of money for the next 2 years. Not to mention, if you want to move on from Aaron Rodgers, you've got a plethora of studs at the wide receiver position. In this particular mock offseason, there's 3 players that I think you're going to have to rely a little more than I would feel comfortable doing. And for me, I think a lot of that has to do with the value that these guys had at the time they were drafted, as well as the potential increase in play due to a new offensive system coming in or just having some time to develop. And that's Mekhi Becton and Denzel Mims. You're going to rely on Becton to be your right tackle, Mims to be a backup wide receiver, probably the same that he's been, last year, but hopefully you can get a little bit more out of him. And then Ashton Davis, I do have him penciled in as our free safety starter. I think you took him in the 3rd round. He's mainly played special teams these last few years. Give him the final year in a contract year to play as a starter and show you what he can do. If he's the weak link on this roster, I don't think he's necessarily that much worse than a Joyner or a Whitehead. At some point you got to rely on some of the draft picks that you make. So for me, that's kind of where I'm at on this. Now in 2024, my projected needs potentially, it could be offensive tackle. You're not going to exercise Mekhi Becton's 5th-year option this offseason, so he's playing in a contract year this year. So there is the potential that you may need a new tackle going into 2024. Strong safety, we brought in Adrian Amos on a 1-year, $1 million contract. I'm hoping we can find someone in-house that could take over those reins. And then linebacker, like I said, we kind of kicked the can down the road for 2 years, so you're replacing Quan Alexander maybe in this season with Overshown. Maybe you can get another linebacker in next year's draft and you're starting to rotate everything out over the course of a few years as opposed to getting all your free agents and new people on the roster in one offseason, because when you got to replace all these guys, now all of them have to learn the defense again. So I think it's important to keep everyone together and have that cohesion when you're trying to go back and have a Super Bowl caliber season. So guys, let me know what you think about this mock off season. Is there anything that particularly irritated you, directions you may want to see us go or not go? Let me know in the comment section down below. And as always, go Jets.